Good morning, everyone. Happy Rotary Thursday. It is fantastic to see everybody here this morning. It's almost like we're getting back to normal, so good times. We have a couple of things on the agenda, and we want to give our professor here, Mr. Waymond Burke, Dr. Burke, some time today to finish his presentation from last week and continue sharing some information about Alabama politics for this week, his second presentation. So I'm going to run through kind of my stuff pretty quickly just to give Dr. Burke plenty of time to speak. We'll start with the invocation though, and if I can ask Mr. Al Turner to lead us in the invocation. Al, if you don't mind coming up here. And if you don't mind taking the pledge as well, Al. That's
Man, I'm at sandbag. This is not my forte. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we have gathered here as caring and compassionate people, both here in the room and online. Help us to go out and work with the rest of our community and our world to make it a better place. Help those out there who are in need be able to get their needs satisfied and let us help where we can to make that better. I ask you that you watch out for our soldiers, our military in harm's way, our first responders who are taking care of those continuing to suffer from this pandemic. We thank you for those who prepared this food and help it to nourish us as we go forward. We ask this all in your name. Amen. Face the flag, please. All you online, face it too. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, I am looking around for guests, and I'm seeing a Rotary family over here on this side of the house, and I see a few folks on the Zoom side. So I think it's just Rotary family today, except for our speaker who'll lead us in a couple of minutes. We'll move over to brags. And we've been falling short on our brags lately. So this is a brag, the fact that we're all here. John's got a brag. We'll either give him a microphone over there. If Dennis, if you want to, there we go. Hopefully that microphone.
Okay, yeah, so Tuesday next week, I'm off to Seattle, Washington. And so hopefully next Saturday, if I'm at Mount Rainier. So hopefully sunrise next Saturday morning at the top. So I'm off.
Is this on?
Can y'all hear Chris on the Zoom side?
Can you hear me?
Everybody's camera shy this morning on the Zoom side.
Okay, hopefully so.
Okay.
I want to brag on Bailey for all her butterfly activities. She is tearing it up, and thanks to everybody who showed up as well.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly say, and again, in an effort to continue to support my community, I applied for the Police Advisory Committee, and I am a member, so be able to help continue to improve our community.
Any more brag? Okay. Do you want to come up here or?
Today, my oldest grandson is graduating the Marine Corps Recruit Training Facility in San Diego, California.
Okay. Any brags on the Zoom side? Sure, of course.
So one quick one. Bill Holtzclaw, I just want to bring up, and the team that went out to K-Tech this week. Just want to thank Bill for organizing that. That's just been an incredible program. The lives that it's touching is just, it's amazing to watch. And for all the team that came out there, what an incredible job. So just thank you to.
Okay. I was going to brag on my son. He had his adenoids removed on Tuesday, which is why I couldn't go to the K-Tech. But y'all had some great brags. He's doing so well. He's back in school today, which I'm sure he's happy about. So, okay, we'll move over to club business. And first, I don't see him on, but I just want to let you know, Chief Bailey, who's been a fantastic Rotarian, he's been recently diagnosed with stage 3 throat cancer. He's never been a smoker. I'm sure running into fires doesn't help. And he'll share a little bit more information with us. I think he's planning on joining meetings, but this week he was starting his chemotherapy. So he said he didn't mind if I shared this information. And he wants to share some other information, health things that can maybe keep us safe or our kids safe. So, but just keep Chief Bailey in your prayers and your thoughts. Again, he'll be joining us. I thought he might be here today, but I think this week he was gonna kick off his treatment. So just keep him in your thoughts. He's been a fantastic Rotarian, been with us a little over a year, I think. Most volunteer events, you can see the chief there. So he's a great Rotarian. All right. Next, I have a couple of pins here that I've been holding for a while, and I'm just missing one person. But if Larry Smith and Bill Holtzclaw wouldn't mind coming up, I have some Paul Harris recognition for you. So first, Larry. Larry is Paul Harris Foundation +4. So that means he's given at least $5,000 to the Paul Harris Foundation since being a Rotarian. So Larry, congratulations. Thank you. I just never know. Well, you got your Marine Corps shirt. Yeah, there you go. So Bill is Paul Harris +1. That means he's given at least $2,000 to the Paul Harris Foundation. So thank you, Bill.
And this is a Bill and Pam Holtzclaw effort, so a family effort.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping things, and then we'll get going. Next week, we'll begin meeting at 7 a.m. So I know most of you here were 7, but we'll officially kick off the meeting at 7, try to get that back to normal for the folks on the Zoom side. So we'll do the invocation and the pledge at 7. We'll have some time to eat, and then we'll kick off the official portion of the meeting at 7:15. So the Zoom folks can continue joining us at 7:15, but we'll go ahead and do the invocation pledge and things like that back to our regular time at 7 a.m. And next week, the card game begins as well. So we have a pretty good full house here. There's 5 cards left, including the Joker. So there's over $1,000 in the pot. So if you're going to come to a meeting over the next couple of weeks, might be the best time to come to meetings. Yes, bring cash. Mark and I were talking about how we're moving to a cashless society and maybe introducing something that might help our card game, since we always, or at least I have to wrangle up $1 whenever we're going to have our meetings if I want to participate in the card game.
And you can't do like Mark, put in 10 and take out 9.
I think I tried to do that in my first Rotary meeting. They're like, no, you don't do that. Okay. Update on K-Tech. I think, thank you, Larry, for bringing that up. I was going to mention that. Thank you, Bill, for leading that. Always a great job. Butterfly habitat. I think Chris gave kudos to Bailey. Bailey and Kathy Gardner have done a fantastic job. That's getting a lot of news recognition. It's all over WAFF and other media. I think they're going to be in Madison Living soon. There's going to be an article on the butterfly habitat. So that's been a great project for the pandemic because it's outdoors and people really gravitate towards that. So that was a lot of fun. Parrots. Tom, I see you're on the Zoom side. I wonder if you have any updates for parrots. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Probably going to get with Gail in the next couple of weeks to sign the contract for the venue. Working with John, we're going to have the same band in this year as last year. And I'm going to be making some calls to nail down a few more of the committee slots for this year. I haven't reached out to everybody yet, but building the team to put the event on, and we'll start having regular Parrots updates as we move forward this year. Okay. Just let me know, Tom, if you need any help from us. Some of us are talking that I think the next step is to start working on the sponsorship letters. And I know you kind of have to shape up what the event is going to look like to work on that sponsorship package. So I think you have plenty of folks that are ready, willing, and able to
jump in and start helping whenever you're ready.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Two other items on my agenda, then I'll just turn it over to you if you have anything. Dr. Nichols reached out to me last week, maybe this week, about an idea for us to maybe implement next year. And it was the perfect timing because Chris is starting to do her planning for next year. So if anybody has any ideas for the community, things that you want to help, I know we have newer Rotarians. If you have any ideas for what we want to do next year to help the community, whether locally or internationally, now's the time to let myself or Chris know so we can discuss those in the upcoming planning session, so we can budget for them. Dr. Nichols had a great idea that Rotary Club in Decatur did that they've been doing for a long time. So we'll discuss that idea amongst anything else that you have to share. So please, now's the time to share those ideas for next year. Lastly, May 10th will be the City of Madison Employee of the Year. Debbie Overcash has chaired that. She's chaired that for the past 20 years. I'll kind of read her statement next week just for time's sake. But Pat, thank you, Pat and Karen, for putting the little reception together. It's going to be a little bit different this year just for social distancing and things. But they've asked Chris, myself, and Bill Holtzclaw to attend Employee of the Year on May 10th, Bill, if that's open on your calendar, just to keep it limited on Rotarians so the families can attend as well. So that's it on my quick kind of agenda items. Does anybody else have any Rotary business before we turn it over to our speaker today? Okay, so there's 0 birthdays this week, so I'm not missing anybody. There's no birthdays, there's no anniversaries, at least according to DAC-DB. So there's not a lot of celebration going on this week for our Rotarians. And then next week, we have Ravi Bansal, who did a solo flight around the world for cancer awareness. He's going to be our program, so that should be an interesting program. I think he's a Rotarian as well, right, Bob? Okay. So, okay, with that, Mark will quickly introduce our guest speaker, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so first, a bit of good news. She didn't brag about it, but out of Neil Lamb's presentation a couple weeks ago, Alex has actually got a tour of Hudson Alpha coming up and ability to talk to Dr. Lamb. So that's kind of cool. And apologize if anybody showed up for Food for Families Monday. I didn't know they switched it to yesterday. And I think there was a lot of food left, but it will be the next Monday, the 4th and the 24th of May. So if you want to come out, it's just a lot of fun and helping people outside. So I'm not going to go into a long introduction because we did that last week. You've all got Waymond's bio. Just a reminder, he is a career educator and a student of politics. And his moniker is that he is a poor, simple, mild-mannered country school teacher. So, Waymond.
Oh, thank you. And when is my time up? 8 o'clock. Ooh, I've got to run. Okay. It's great to be here again. And I understand I'm a double hitter. I'm the first one, I'm told. So I feel sort of special there. I didn't get to finish up last week, but I was talking about, the Alabama politics, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's a whole lot of the ugly as well, as you know. And we started out talking about Democratic dominance in the early 20th century on up until actually recent years. But that has changed dramatically, of course, in the past 2 decades. So we talked about Big Jim Folsom and the triumph of the progressives. And we talked about George Wallace, Old South versus New South. We talked about civil rights and Alabama politics, because I think that's probably the most important factor in Alabama politics, definitely in my lifetime and even before. And I want to briefly address the reemergence of the Republican Party in Alabama. And one of my closest friends, Ken Carpenter, some of you may know him. He's a teacher here locally, or he's retired now. But when he was 14 years old, they moved to Athens, Alabama. And he said they were Episcopalian Republicans in Athens. And he said that when they walked down the street, people would point at them because And at one time, you could have a Republican Party meeting in a phone booth and have empty seats. How things have changed. The Democratic dominance was for a long time, and now the tables have flipped almost the way they were probably 30 years ago. But the Republican Party has always been here. And as a matter of fact, the 1901 Constitution, one of its goals, in addition to disenfranchising African Americans, was to try to prevent the growth of the Republican Party, because many early members of the Republican Party in Alabama were African American leaders. Probably the most prominent would be Booker T. Washington. And so, again, we know what has happened over these years. This is just a piece of stationery from over in Huntsville of the Republican Executive Committee. So they were here and active. And that's a full part of that document. We had actually 3 African-American congressmen. One man was from Florence, who were Republicans, James Thomas Rapier. And he was also a plantation owner, interestingly enough, in the post-Civil War era, along with 2 other African-American congressmen. He had a very interesting life. He's well worth researching and studying his ideas and so forth. He was a bridge builder type individual. James Carraway was an African-American Speaker of the House in the Alabama legislature. Here he is in a negative caricature of the time. And he was also a part of the 54th Massachusetts, which is the film Glory is based on that story in the Civil War. The most prominent African-American leader, of course, was Booker T. Washington. He was the patronage person during Republican administrations, during the McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt, and William Howard Taft administrations. He was the guy you went to get things done. And of course, this may say, I like sort of say what moments in history to say, really? That wasn't supposed to be, not that putting agree or disagree on it necessarily, but I didn't realize that. This is him with Teddy Roosevelt. Oh, by the way, this is a letter to Booker T. Washington from Teddy Roosevelt saying, I'm coming south and I need to meet with you about some appointments, federal type appointments. This is a political button from a meeting that Teddy Roosevelt had with Booker T. Washington in the White House. It's one of the most valuable political buttons you can collect. I collect political items, and it's about a $20,000 piece, as a matter of fact. And this comes in some variations. Some of them make Washington look darker, sinister, that type of thing. Some are more pro. Some say equality with a question mark. So they're very variants of it. But this is one of my favorites. This is actually from a stereo view. You remember those things. I tell the young people, it's an early version of whatever latest device that you have. It's about the size of a letter, and it's got 2 shots. This is the governor of Alabama, Joseph Johnston. This is President McKinley, and this is Booker T. Washington on the same stage together in 1898 in Tuskegee. And if you look in the foreground of the people you see there, it's actually an integrated audience. That's one of those say what moments, you might say. But that's how prominent he was. Even the white politicians had to go see him to get something done at the time. He fought vigorously against the 1901 Constitution, by the way. Of course, another prominent Alabama Republican would be Jesse Owens. I mean, think about it. The Republican Party is the party of emancipation, as I've told you. And his support, particularly in northern cities, was very important because most African Americans were discriminated against in Alabama, as you know. And so, but in places like Illinois, like in Chicago, where there was still discrimination, but probably not the degree in the Jim Crow South, a large African American turnout could flip Illinois' electoral votes. So this became very important in some key purple states, we call them now. James Martin, he was the first Republican congressman elected in probably 100 years in 1964. Later went on to the distinguished career. Actually, he was, I think he was in conservation, that type of thing. Guy Hunt was the first Republican governor in the 20th century, of course. And of course, Senator Denton was elected the first U.S. senator, Republican senator in 1980. Shelby, who later he was started out as a Republican, a Democrat, became a Republican. Jeff Sessions, Bob Riley. Most of this is recent history, so I'm not going to go into any deep stories except a couple. You recognize most of these names. Governor Ivey, of course. And Judge Roy Moore, sort of a lightning rod in Alabama politics. And I've got to tell you this little story right here. I love this story. You've all seen The Rock probably, or seen pictures of it and so forth, the monument, the 10 Commandments monument. And probably like everybody else, I made my way down to the Justice Building in Montgomery to see it. And, it's about yay high, as I recall, and a pretty big block of limestone there. But of course, it was removed, and I was wondering where it was at. So I went on the internet and I found out it was at a church down in Gadsden. So I drove down there to see it because I wanted to see if I remembered something correctly or incorrectly that I saw there. And so I went down and I told them I was a school teacher. You can get away with a lot of things if you tell people you're a school teacher. They even took my check at a pawn shop one time. I told them I was a teacher. I was buying my son a stereo or something. But anyway, it's on the back of up against the wall. They had it in this room, and I got down on my knees, got back there and took a picture of it. And sure enough, it's what I remember. It says copyright 2001, Roy Moore and two other people, neither of whom were God or Moses. And in academia, we do call that plagiarism. I'm sure it was the design, but have a little bit of fun with that. My good friend David Asbell, I know Senator, David, he's a good buddy of mine, and he actually wrote this book for Speaker Hubbard, and of course things did not go well with him in the end. The 14 elections, controversy, the special election in 2017 that brought about Doug Jones, of course, and the alleged scandals in the race that we all remember that very well. And Doug Jones, and the 2018 governor's race, of course. And, the turnout, I don't have the numbers up here, but at one time it was just lopsided, like 90% turnout in the Democrats. And the opposite is true today, of course. I don't know if it'll ever balance out again in my lifetime. I'm sure things have a way of balancing out. Governor Ivey again there, and leaders of the future. There are probably some more people we could put up here, but these are some people still, and others who are being talked about. Charles Barkley, maybe some have said that Charles Barkley should run for the Senate. So we will see, but we're starting out with a new group of people, of course. And so I'm going to stop right there because I want to get into my other presentation, and I've got 20 minutes and I'm going to be running real fast. If you want to go ahead and set it up, I'll go ahead and tell you. I call this ideological labels, and some people say ideology. I think it's sort of like potato and potato, but ideological labels have always interested me, and it's a central part of the dissertation that I wrote. And I will tell you about writing a dissertation that if any of you have sleep apnea, if I could put chapter 2, review of the related literature and appeal, I'd be a rich man. It's the most boring thing you will ever read. But I love this cartoon here. He stands there all day saying nothing, promising everything. It's called politics. I'm sorry, Senator. I've got a big... I don't think you're ever former. Ideological labels in modern American culture. And this has always fascinated me about how we describe ourselves, because we toss terms around like liberal and conservative around and so forth. Well, what do they really mean? I think we probably have some idea of what they think we think they mean, but we may interpret them differently. And I like to say this about views and so forth. We always, the other side has got their head in the sand. I don't care who it is, right? We're right and they're wrong, whatever. But I'm one, I believe in talking to people. I always encourage this with my students, that you listen to other people. You got more in common than you do different. Don't make any enemies, and be able to eat, Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner together. because I know people have lost friends over this thing, and and I don't want to lose any friends. Um, and I may not always be right myself. But I do encourage that. I always say the other side is not the enemy; it's the loyal opposition. That's a healthy way to look at it. And Abraham Lincoln, of course, talked about the better angels of our nature. But definitive ideological truth, what is it? Well, I guess it's a point of view in many cases, and there are many contradictions in life. Um, but searching for political identity in a world obsessed with labels. What do we mean by liberal conservatives? How do we interpret our lives using these labels? Do they accurately describe who we are? I've got this little cartoon here. You'll notice that Mark Jacobson is a liberal in social matters, a conservative in economic matters, and a homicidal psychopath in political matters. So I hope my friend Mark has a good sense of humor. But really the central question of liberal and conservatives, what's the role of government? If you watch the president's speech last night and Senator Scott's rebuttal and so forth, it's a fight over what is the role of government. What do we think that government should do and what should government not do? I'm not just talking about the national level. I'm talking about the state and local level. You've had that debate here in the lovely town of Madison. We should have a baseball team or not. Some things that would start a fight in an empty bar, right? But what should government do? My son, who's sort of a nomad, he lived in a bunch of places, and he lived in Apache Junction, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. And it's out on the eastern side near the Superstition Mountains, and lovely place out there. But I went out just for a father-son thing at one point when he was there. Sometimes his mom and I would both go, and sometimes I would just go. And I always stayed in a hotel because I never stayed with him because I had a very different definition of hygiene, and you parents know what I'm talking about. And I go over to get him one morning at the house, and of course he's still sleeping, and he's in a rock band at this time. And I'm standing there in the living room, and the garbage truck goes by, and it literally goes by his house and does not pick his garbage up, and his garbage is out there. And I said, "Did you pay your garbage bill?" And he said, "No." He said, "We have to hire our own garbage company. The city or the county doesn't pick it up. You've got to contract like you do cable or whatever for folks to pick up your garbage." And I'm thinking that really can't be efficient. I mean, those garbage trucks get about minus 10 miles to a gallon, right? Have two of them running down your street. But they had very minimal services, let's say, in that little city. I found that interesting. Getting government off our backs. We hear this a lot. When I was a teacher, and when I taught high school, I also taught economics, but I'm not credentially qualified to teach that at Calhoun. By the way, I love teaching high school. Some people thought it was crazy. I wouldn't go back, but I really loved it. I had great kids, and I taught at Butler for many years, as some of you know, and I love my community and so forth there. But I had in my honors economics class, they had to read these two books, Free to Choose and The Age of Uncertainty. And of course, Free to Choose, well, let's talk about this one first. Galbraith is an economic liberal. He says everything that government does has a constituency for it somewhere. Found that interesting. And of course, Milton Friedman was an economic conservative, a political conservative. And so I had chapters lined up, and I wanted to do the pro-con thing, and they had to write, and I taught the AP classes as well. So that was very helpful. Probably of all things I did with kids back in high school, the things I always got the best feedback was from this project that we had to do, because it tried to prepare them to argue from either side of an issue, using facts rather than emotion and so forth. And these guys are both brilliant, whether you agree with them or not. And so they played a role in me thinking about this. Now, I should share something else with you, that I'm a native of Greater Huntsville, and I hope that doesn't offend you, that term, but I actually I was born in Huntsville, but I grew up down in the Owens Crossroads area, which back when it was, my mom called it the sticks because she was a city girl, and she didn't like living out there because we lived on a gravel road and that type of thing. But my parents were very much fundamentalist Christians. I mean, they were a part of the Big Cove Free Holiness Church. So if any of you are familiar with that faith, you know, it's they're pretty rigid. I'll just tell you that, pretty rigid. Good people, just a little rigid for me. But but they were good people. And but Dad always called himself a conservative. And so I grew up as a kid thinking, well, we must be conservatives because that's what Mom and Dad said we were, right? But as we got older, I realized Dad always had a big heart. They're really FDR liberals. And what, you know, that's really what he was on. He felt that there was a role for government to help people to help themselves. And of course, considering his background, his father died when he was 4, and his mother, they became migrant farm workers and these types of things to survive. And as a matter of fact, I did his eulogy and he wanted to hear it before I gave it. He was dying of cancer and he wanted to know what this eulogy is going to say. And he had me to put something in there. It really touched me. He said, I want you to put in there that if it hadn't been for FDR, my family would have starved to death. That's how deeply it went with him. But the ideological spectrum, thinking this over the years and so forth. And today, of course, we identify blue with maybe the left, red with the right. That's only a recent thing, the past maybe 3 or 4 decades. And purple with the middle. And so I draw my little political spectrum up there and we go through these little things of, you know, different people, whether it's President Biden or President Trump or President Obama, whomever, and some other person, where would you put them on the, and they disagree about, you know, where you should put them and so forth. Can you be liberal to a point that you're not a nut job? And can you be conservative to a point that you're not a nut job? You know, those type of questions and so forth. Of course, how you define nut job may be different from individual to individual. I did see a tag. Look, I love to read people's bumper stickers and things. And there was a tag yesterday on this guy's truck. I promise you, I took a picture of it. And it said wingnut on his tag. And he had some controversial stickers on his vehicle. I want to say one other thing. The thing is, though, sometimes you get the political right and the political left have something in common. You get out in no bad land. And as I say a little bit later in here, one of them will shoot you and the other will burn you with a stake. That they both really want to control. The extremist groups really want to control what you read, this type of thing. I've had people to jump me about having students to read Galbraith on one side of the fence and other people to jump me about reading Friedman on the other side of the fence. I wanted to talk about political left and political right and so forth, where it came from. This actually comes from France. It's back when they off the head of the king and the queen and so forth, and a very complicated, interesting history of how they established the French National Assembly. And when they met, I guess people just sat where they wanted, but they couldn't conduct business because somebody's speaking, the other guy punches him out. And so they had to break up fights constantly. So they finally took the folks who wanted to do away with the monarchy on the left side of the hall. They put the pro-monarchy people on the right side of the hall, and they put the moderates in between to keep them separated. So that's where we get political left and political right. Liberal and conservative definitions have been rooted in our collective political memory for over a century. Liberal has become entrenched with meaning more government involvement. And conservative has become more entrenched with laissez-faire, another French term, government hands-off, less government. And as I said, I don't trust extremists on the left or the right. One will shoot to the other, burn you at the stake. So I get around, it's caught my attention. I've written an article on this, and Mark, I'll send it to you. It was published by Yale.com about 7 or 8 years ago. If you would like to read it and you can respond, and I'm not offended for you to disagree with me. I want my students to take me on. You know what I'm saying? That's a good, healthy thing. Civility is the key point there. And it says, survey says Alabama is the most conservative state. And I'm not doubting there are true conservatives in Alabama, but are we really that conservative? And that's the article that I wrote about. And Alabama's usually in the top 4 or 5. They do this each year, Gallup does. And I wrote about this in my dissertation. God, that thing is boring, as I told you, so I won't go over it again. But I based my study on a book written by Madison Lilly. It's called Beyond Liberal and Conservative, Reassessing the Political Spectrum. And sometimes people say, well, you're just using some left wing standard here to define what's liberal and conservative in other terms. This was published by the Cato Institute. If you know what the Cato Institute, it is the libertarian conservative think tank. This is their criteria. Are you with me? And basically what Gallup asked is, how do you see yourself? You know, do you find yourself as a liberal conservative? And many people do have a view on that. Some people don't know, and or even sometimes don't care, and that's fine. It's an acceptable answer. But what about issues that are liberal conservative? Where do you stand on certain issues to be liberal or conservative? And what Maddox and Lilly said, there are really two central questions to this about determining a person's, okay, first of all, the first thing I asked you was a nominal identification, you know, how we perceive ourselves. The other is an operative identification. That is on the issues, you know, hot issues, gun control, school prayer, you know, abortion, you know, the hot button issues. How do you feel on that issue? And what they say, there's two central questions to determine a person's operative political ideological label. Should government regulate the economy? And regulating the economy is, you know, everything from interest rates to minimum wage or whatever, issues like that. And the other question is, should the government guarantee civil liberties? Whether it's civil rights, whether it's gay rights, whether it's whatever rights are out there. And they would say that liberals would generally say yes. And note that I use the word general. I'll clarify that in a moment. Yes and yes. And they would say that a person who generally agreed with those things would lean liberal. Conservatives generally laissez-faire, stay out of business, this type of thing, onerous things about business. They would generally say no to the first and generally say no to the second because particularly the, well, I'll get into the libertarians in a moment, but basically let society work these things out. Would generally say no, but they say that society is too complicated to fit in one of those two categories. So they created libertarian and populist, which should not be confused with two minor political parties by that name necessarily. They would say libertarians, and a lot of Gen X types and so forth are very libertarian. And that is, they believe that it's not government's role to tell us what's moral or what's not moral or whatever. But so they're excuse me, they would say yes to that. But on government regulating the economy, they're more laissez-faire. Okay, and then another would be populist. Should government regulate the economy? Well, we go back to American history back in the 1890s and so forth, when there was a call for government regulation against monopolies and so forth. A political party grew out of that. And about railroads, about telecommunications and so forth, which were, you know, railroads, they just charged farmers whatever they wanted to charge. You know, there was no, and so they passed laws and created a political party around regulating what railroads, since they were a monopoly, could charge. So the libertarians, the populists very much wanted government to regulate big business, but they were not involved in the civil rights fight or the women's issues of suffrage and so forth of the time. So they're generally no on that. And they say that 80% of the people will fall into one of those four categories. And you notice the military thing is not in there. It's because we often identify it as more conservative today. Although, and I think I would argue that became predominant with President Reagan in that era. It was in the 1920s, probably three of the most ideological conservative presidents we've ever had would have been Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover in the 1920s. And they basically gut cut the American military. It was the liberal FDR who rebuilt the military so that we were prepared for World War II. Kennedy, when he ran in 1960, he was running against then Vice President Nixon, saying that there was a missile gap, that the Eisenhower-Nixon administration had failed to adequately defend the country missile defense. And God, we love missile defense here, don't we? It's, yes, okay. Default ideological label. I think my father, for example, going back to him in a moment, he described himself as a conservative because of his religious views. I think they do mix together. This is out here, and I don't know if this sign is, I meant to drive up to see if it was here. I found the wording interesting. Semantics and ideology. I don't want to offend anybody if this is your church, but contemporary in our praise, conservative in his word, caring for our community. I always find words very interesting the way they're used in a particular context. Left and right, political semantics in American culture. No, remember it's righty-tighty or lefty-loosey. So self-labeling. Are we accurate in this? This is a Fox News thing sometime in the recent past. I'm not sure I have the date up there of how people identified themselves. Religion and ideology, religious nationalism. This is a John McNaughton, who's a sort of a controversial figure, showing Jesus delivering the Constitution and showing all the ugly liberals back there, the Hollywood Reporter, those folks. But both sides use it. This is my favorite photograph on the 16th campaign. It's this is Danny Mobile, as a matter of fact, the first mass Trump rally. And, but on the left, there's the woke crowd. The woke is a term that's gaining usage again. It actually came out of the 40s, I've read. And, but, some of the woke is the left of the left, you might say. And even James Carville was really going after what he called the woke left. He said, if you this defund the police, those types of positions and so forth. It's quite controversial. And about, some schools teaching little kids to be activists, this type of thing. Probably a lot of parents don't feel comfortable about that. I'll argue everything's age appropriate. Elementary school is probably not age appropriate. Parties and ideological labels should not be confused with political parties by the same name. Role reversals. The Republican Party was America's original liberal party. It was the party of emancipation. It was also the party of government regulation with Teddy Roosevelt. While the Democrats were the laissez-faire conservatives, the Democratic Party did not have a civil rights blanket until 1948. The Republicans had one since the beginning from 1854. These are the questions I asked students. If they did 4 and 4, I put that yes. I did lean liberal. If it's 4 and 4, no, lean conservative, and there are various shades in there. Nominal responses. How do you identify yourself? These are 400 kids randomly selected in Madison County and Huntsville in 1987. I wish I could go back and ask the kids the same questions, but no way, because everything is anonymous. 28%, I'll round up, said they were nominally conservative. 34% said they were not nominally liberal. 34% said they were nominal conservative. 11% was something else. 23% not sure. 5% no response. Party affiliation, 25% said they were Democrats. 28% said they were Republicans. On over. And what issues do you have to agree with to be liberal or conservative? And that's what I was asking right here. And these were hot issues at the time. And we worked with another number of academics to and a couple of pollsters to pick these questions here. That's what it looked like. We didn't have any fancy fonts back in the day. Nominal ID versus operative ID. I told you about that. I'm almost through. Give me 2 minutes here. I say that sometimes when the bell rings. And I told you nominally. Operatively, about 37% were more likely to lean liberal, about 11% conservative, about 25% populist, about 9% libertarian. Identity politics, wedge issues, these things become very important in our lives, as you know, and those are all start a fight in an empty bar. Why do people identify themselves with a political label? They're diverse in their opinions. I know people who are very much pro-choice, but are actually very conservative people, and vice versa. Some people who are pro-life and very liberal and everything else, but they'll define their issue based on that very important issue to them. And there are other issues as well. And status versus conservatives. Barry Goldwater, Mr. Conservative in modern American history. Barry Goldwater said that he said there's no such thing as a conservative Christian. Now, I may disagree with him on his use, but he said that because he said that some religious groups want to use the power of government to regulate what people can do in their lives and so forth. And he says true conservatives do not believe government should regulate anything beyond the minimum necessity. Again, these roles: minimum wage, Social Security, Medicare, healthcare, consumer protection, military defense. What is the role of government? We probably all like some things that government does and don't like others. Reagan owned government. Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem, but he went on to say something else. It's not my intention to do away with governments, rather to make it work. And political semantics, at one time liberal meant something else. And I've also got to say, hey, words are changing meanings. You know what I'm saying? So I can't say that religious conservative, I might differ with Goa. Maybe the terms have changed. We just don't know it yet. So anyway, just something to think about. And limited government 600 for next 600 miles. Thank you. Shoot at me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burke. I was a little concerned when Mark put Dr. Burke on the agenda. I said 2 meetings about politics. How's that going to work? But he walks a fine line. He did a great job. Thank you, Dr. Burke. Very engaging. I think he'll stick around maybe for a couple minutes if anybody has any questions or they want to talk to Dr. Burke. I noticed he stuck around last week, so thank you for that. Is there anything else before we close with the 4-way test? Okay, please stand. First of the things we think, say, or do. First, truth. Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will build goodwill and better friendships. And fourth, will be beneficial to all concerned. Thank you all. Have a great day. See y'all next week.